we probably have not seen the last of this Israeli response. This could be the first stage, another response. I hope it isn't. Uh, I feel that we are on the precipice. It's very precarious of where we are in terms of this perhaps winding down or widening and escalating rather quickly.
What do we know so far? Israel said they would retaliate. It's nearly 2 hours since we first heard reports of explosions in Iran. Let's find out exactly what we do know. Samir Al-Rush is the Times Middle East correspondent who's here. Thank you so much for your time. Just tell us, what do we know? What's been confirmed?
Oh, good morning. There have been reports that Israel's carried out airstrikes in Iran. So far, we haven't seen any confirmation from Israel, any formal confirmation. There are American officials who've been briefing press in the U.S. that they were notified about a strike and that Israel has indeed carried out a strike. And there were explosions overheard in the city of Isfahan. Now, curiously, the Iranian media had reported the explosions initially, saying that the cause was unknown. But since then, they've been playing them down. One spokesman for the Iranian Space Agency said that there were no missile strikes in the country, and the sounds that were heard were from the interception of several quadcopter drones. He posted on Twitter that it was, quote, a failed attack with a few quadcopters. So not the nature of the strike itself isn't clear. And it sounds like the Iranians are playing it down. And now they had promised to massively and harshly respond to an Israeli strike. But I think they might just massively snub it at this rate. And that would be in their interest.
Well, clearly. Israel had said they were going to retaliate. I think it became quite clear yesterday something like this was looming. It means Netanyahu has ignored the concerns of Biden to say, take the win, don't act again.
Well, I think that's correct. On the other hand, Israel could have, just by what we can tell for now, this strike has not caused an extensive amount of damage, as far as we can tell. I think it would be hard to conceal if it were something major and something very, very punishing. It would be hard to conceal. So what Israel might have opted to do, and again, it is very, very early to tell, and it's also too early to tell whether this was a one-off strike or whether there's further military action being contemplated by the Israelis. But if this were a one-off, this could have been a compromise in which Israel does breach Iranian airspace, does hit something. It counts as a strike, but it's so minimal that the Iranians can shrug it off and not escalate further. And the Iranians themselves don't want an escalation. So if that were the case, again, it being too early to kind of tell at this point, but if that were the case, it would sound like a very reasonable compromise from the Israelis towards U.S. and British concerns.
It could be a saving face for both sides, you're saying?
Yes, I think that might be what we're looking at now.
Thank you so much for taking some time. This is clearly going to be a very busy day. Sam, I really appreciate it. Sam Al-Rush, the Times Middle East correspondent, who'll be back on Times Radio Breakfast shortly as well. Listening to that conversation is Captain Armin Curden, a former US Navy captain, foreign policy analyst. Armin, thank you so much for your time. Listening to that, what do you make of Israel's response? As we've just heard from Sam, quite difficult to know exactly at this point what's happened, but from what we know so far.
Absolutely. Good morning to you all, Rosie. Well, my biggest concern was that Israel, prior to today, had a lot of, let's call it geopolitical capital. I mean, never before in the history of the world had the U.S. and Israel been expending weapons at the same time, much less with, an Arab nation to boot, Jordan, along with France and Great Britain. So I was very hopeful that Israel would not actually respond, but that was going to be predicated on the U.S. showing some real, genuine, strong leadership in going back to the UN and saying we need to reimpose full and absolute sanctions upon Iran to stop their money flow, which is what's paying for all of these weapons, these drones, these ballistic missiles, which Iran can, quite frankly, they can churn out pretty quickly
Mm.
and lob against targets in Israel or other Western targets. So uh, uh, we probably have not seen the last of this Israeli response. This could be the first stage, another response. I hope it isn't. Uh, I feel that we are on the precipice. It's very precarious of where we are in terms of this perhaps winding down or widening and escalating rather quickly. There's a real wild card to the north of Israel and Hezbollah, and of course the rest of the militias. So a lot remains to be seen.
And of course, this happened in the last couple of hours, so we've got to be cautious, really, with looking at sort of wider implications at this stage. What is
Yes,
interesting is what we've heard there is that in Iran, they're sort of slightly at this point downplaying what's happened, and the state broadcaster is doing the same. Does that suggest that for them, actually, they really don't want this to go another step further?
absolutely. So publicly, Iran puts on a lot of bluster for for their people, and that's why they felt that they had to respond with their drone and rocket strike a week ago. Right now, my guess, and I don't have any evidence to prove this, but my guess is that Israel probably struck in an area which Iran knows is sensitive, but perhaps deliberately targeted maybe even open ground or buildings that were useless for no other reason than to send a message to say, hey, Iran, we can reach out to you whenever we want, and you don't even know that we were coming with a very limited strike such as this, something that's so small, and perhaps the very limited strikes that we're hearing about in Iraq and Syria, if those are yet to be verified, if that's the case, and this is just simply Israel just with a message of their own saying, don't do this again, and if this is not the precursor to something larger, then perhaps we can wind it down. Um, what
Do you think that would be enough for Netanyahu?
I would certainly hope so. I would certainly hope so. I think it would be, especially if Iran doesn't respond in kind. Now, in fairness to Israel, Iran is really through its proxies has been attacking Israel since October the 7th and neutral shipping for several months in the Gulf of Oman, the Red Sea, through their proxies, the Houthi rebels. All of these militias, there's about a dozen of them in 6 countries surrounding Israel on multiple sides, are all funded from Iran. That's where they get all their money, all their oil money. So that is where I think the United States has really failed over the last few years and allowing these sanctions to be open and allowing the money to come.
Sounds like we might have just lost the line there. Let's see if we can re-establish it. If you've just joined the programme, we knew Israel were going to retaliate. Netanyahu made it very clear. Oh, I think we have re-established
Yeah,
connection. No worries.
no worries.
I think the last question I really want to sort of understand is from the perspective of Israel's allies. So you over there in the States, us here in the United Kingdom. What position does it leave us in? I think the UK and the US were pretty united actually in the words that were being said publicly to Netanyahu to say, please do not retaliate, proceed with caution. You've got to be smart about it, take the win. Where does it leave Israel's allies?
So it leaves them in a position really kind of looking for guidance and leadership from the U.S. But in the absence of that, uh, Britain and France, the rest of Europe, nobody wants a war in the Middle East. It's not good for anyone. It's not good for energy. It's not good for business. It's not good for the world economy. I'm going to go back about 20 years in the past, and the strength of leadership. The speeches provided by Tony Blair when he was speaking in support of the U.S., especially after 9/11. That was absolutely amazing. That is leadership right there. That is how you speak to the world in a clear and concise manner. That's what I'm hoping we'll get from the United States, and the United States needs to lead the rest of the world in this kind of discussion because, to be quite honest, the United States, we are still the preeminent military and economic power in the world, and we have a responsibility to lead. And we don't expect our European allies to blindly follow us either. We hope for good, strong leadership from them, and thank you to the European allies for supporting Israel, and also separate topic, of course, supporting Ukraine as well as they
Mm.
have in their war against Russia.
Of course. Captain Arman Kadain, thank you so much. Former US
Thank
Navy
you.
captain and foreign policy analyst on the wider repercussions of this conflict. If you've just joined us, Israel said they'd retaliate. The US is reporting this morning that an Israeli missile has struck Iran. At this point, no reports of any casualties. Several flights have been diverted around Iran's air sites. We can see that from tracking sites. Of course, we're going to be very closely following this here on Times Radio and steering you through any of the developments as they come here on the station.